So, hi. I wanted to have a little conversation about specialty coffee. Um, I'm a barista. If you haven't met me before, I run an account called BlackBaristaClub, and I talk about systemic racism within the coffee industry and how it affects not only farmers but baristas. So, all throughout the industry, specifically talking about race and discrimination and you know the the real conversations that coffee should be engaging with but continually misinterpret or ignore entirely. So today we're going to talk about how specialty coffee fails to be special, and I'm not going to give you a solution. I'm not. It's not my job to. I'm just going to point out some problems that I find in specialty coffee, and hopefully we can collectively come together within this wave of coffee or a future wave of coffee and address them finally. First, I'm going to talk about low wages within all of the areas of coffee. So, from farmer to barista, except coffee shop owners and specifically coffee business owners, because they are paid significantly more than everybody else is, and they do the least amount of work. So, and by work, don't be offended, because I know a lot of us are capitalists. Not me. I live in a capitalist society though. But I know work can be a pretty broad term. Work can simply mean you had an idea. Work can mean the labor that is involved. Work can mean a lot of things. But specifically, I'm going to be talking about the actual labor. Getting the coffee from the plant to the table, like the actual labor that is happening. Not you created an idea and you wanted a coffee shop. So I think about this a lot. Coffee, specialty coffee specifically, has this sort of elitist background, in that we believe that it is so much better than Folgers or even Starbucks. We believe that we are so separate from those entities and those enterprises, but we continually engage in all of the behavior that they do, if not worse, because I'll make in the next point, we expect our baristas and we expect our farmers to exceed the standards of Folgers and Starbucks, things of those wave. So we have this thought that by naming it specialty coffee is so much different than all these other things, when we are all continually paid the same amount. Farmers are not being paid more. There is in fact not even laws in place within specialty coffee or rules in place within specialty coffee that require them to be paid more money, or a wage that'll allow them to sustain the land that grows the coffee on. What we are doing is we're adding more rules and regulations so that they have to meet them to sell them to other businesses that will potentially pay them more money. So we're not even establishing an actual sense of progression. There is no progression from what we've done before. So we are quite literally doing the same thing that we did before, but putting a fun name on it. And as I addressed before, high expectations without compensation, or affordable, accessible rates for classes or education. We created this idea that if you are specialty coffee certified or you work in specialty coffee, that you have to acquire more skills. So things like latte art and using organic farming practices require more skills. They require not only the farmer to know more about the land that they're farming on, to have access to equipment that they need to make the product, certain grade so that buyers can even buy it, or so that buyers can even taste it. And we require baristas, whom are still being paid minimum wage, mind you, in every single state, to have more skills than, say, a Starbucks barista, or someone that just puts a Keurig cup in a machine, right? We are still getting paid that same amount to do a hobby what I would like to call a hobby, a talent, something that you actually invest your time in, not the time that the work pays you for, because you're not being paid for any of the training, you are required to come with those skills. And beyond coming with those skills, you are not compensated for them. So you do latte art, cool. You're not getting paid for it though. Lack of diversity. So this is my favorite one because I love talking about it. The lack of diversity, especially within educational spaces, and the unwillingness to address the systematic effects of the lack of diversity and what it is having on every single aspect of the coffee industry. Specifically, I want to talk about lack of diversity within baristas. So one thing that I noticed that specialty coffee likes to do is find their favorite barista, and they're usually white. They're always white, or white passing, if not white, visually to the eye, white. They like to do that. They find certain minorities as like a little sprinkle of diversity within each field in each section of education and space. And we like to use that as our goalpost for, what we like to think about specialty coffee and where we get our education from. I have a problem with this, and many other people have a problem with this, because not only does that trickle its way into hiring practices, which mean a lot of coffee shops, if you go to any coffee-centric area, I was born in Seattle, so I was around a lot of coffee, mostly white, if not all white. By default, you are set as a higher educator, or a person that's more knowledgeable if you are white, specifically male. We can all agree that most coffee shops you go to, that's who you're going to see. If not, that's who is the manager. If not, that is who the roaster is. So on and so forth. You get what I'm saying. And we have a failure to address the colonization of coffee and the systematic effects that has within these spaces. So we started off with coffee with exploitation. We exploited it. That is how a lot of the things that we have on this earth happen, believe it or not. And I understand that. It's something that we cannot go back in time and change. But what we can do is educate and create curriculums around that within specialty coffee to make sure that people know, to make sure that we are not perpetuating that same behavior, which leads to hiring practices, lack of diversity, things like that, making people uncomfortable within these spaces. And we have to have a more proactive approach towards addressing these things and not allowing them to seep into other areas, because the reason we don't have many female roasters in general in all of coffee, the reason we don't have a lot of any sort of diversity, be it LGBT diversity, be it, any minority period in a lot of these areas, is because it is still under the thumb of a lot of white men. Do I think that's inherently wrong? Of course not, but I think that there is a way to make that change and a way to make it inclusive for everybody involved, and not just inclusive for one type of person, the type of people that we see all the time, the type of people that a lot of us follow, we know who they are. So another one that I want to bring up that kind of is its own sort of thing is the lack of service given back to the systems that are exploited. Once again, there is very little talk about what we can do to be helping these farmers and what we can do to be providing them the resources necessary to actually have sustainable practices and to perpetuate sustainable practices. This is not even including the fact that specialty coffee engages with a lot of other industries like sugar and chocolate and other things that have also been colonized and exploited continually. So I just think that that's a point that we should be making as something that is seemingly different than the other coffee that we've been using, is that we actually should engage with the community and create a sense of community within all areas of coffee, and that includes being more diverse. And lastly, and my favorite one, is using baristas to distract from the impact that coffee has globally, especially on low-income communities. You would know, if you lived in a large city, how often it is that coffee shops will enter low-income communities and not only charge rates that people cannot afford, and knowingly charge rates that people cannot afford, perpetuate the gentrification of these communities, which, again, I don't think is inherently bad. But it does have a negative impact on the communities that it serves. Not only is it perpetuating the thing that's already happening, but it is not giving back to the community of which it is taking from. You are taking up space in a community that is already struggling to even survive and thrive by doing what you're doing. You know, like, it's obvious, but it isn't at all talked about. I rarely see a coffee shop that is genuinely trying to help houseless people, though I do see a lot and hear a lot of coffee shops that complain about the same houseless people that they kicked out of their neighborhood. Because we have to remember that a lot of these people were here first. And I get it, America was built on this, but if you're going to call yourself specialty coffee and you're going to perpetuate the idea that we're different than what we've already had previously, shouldn't we actually be actively being different than what we already see? At least that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think. I'm always open to ideas. I'm always open to criticism. I want to know what you think about this too. Please leave them down below. Thank you for watching.